This is the real coin toss. The man turns every coin into a bullet. But don't get it twisted, this isn't some kind of superpower. The coin flinger, Elijah, is an ancient vampire who's been alive for over 1,000 years, one of the originals. Flashback to the day before, the vampire brothers teamed up to drive a stake through Elijah's heart. Any other vampire would be dead for good, but for an original, a wound like that just needs a nap to heal. To protect Elena, Damon decides to go on the offensive and face Klaus head-on. But who exactly is Klaus? He's the strongest of the originals, the king at the top of the pyramid. Compared to him, Elijah is nothing more than a harmless little bunny. Klaus isn't someone you just casually drop in on.
How do I find Klaus?
You don't find Klaus, he finds you.
Come on.
The only reason Rose managed to get in touch with Elijah is through a vampire named Slater. Instead of spending his endless time wreaking havoc like other vampires, Slater chose to study. Now, he's got 18 bachelor's degrees, 3 master's degrees, and 4 doctorates. He's practically a vampire anomaly. Damon is less than impressed. Rose explains that Damon wants to contact Klaus, but to Damon's surprise, Slater's plan is to check a classified ad site. That's how he got in touch with Elijah. As they chat in the coffee shop, Elijah, standing across the street, gives a street musician $100, then grabs a handful of coins. Even from across the street, Elijah can hear every word of their conversation. Meanwhile, after fighting side by side several times, Jeremy starts to develop feelings for Bonnie, but Bonnie hesitates because he's Elena's brother. To make matters worse, a new student named Luca had just transferred to the school. Not only does he show interest in Bonnie, but he's also a male witch, which makes Jeremy feel threatened. There's one thing Damon still can't figure out: if the originals aren't affected by sunlight, why does Klaus want to break the sun and moon curse? Slater tells Damon it's to prevent the werewolves from breaking it first.
If a vampire breaks the sun curse, then the werewolves are stuck with the curse of the moon forever, and vice versa.
Can we stop the curse from being broken at all?
You think I'm gonna help you figure out how to do something that will piss off an original and keep me from walking in the sun?
None of them realize that across the street, Elijah is preparing to strike. Elijah gracefully tosses the coins into the air, and every single one shoots forward like a bullet, shattering the double-paned glass into dust. Because Rose and Slater didn't have daylight rings, they could only scream in agony under the scorching sunlight. Damon rescues Rose, only to find that Slater has disappeared. Rose, now jumpy as a frightened bird, believes this was a warning from Klaus. Back at the castle, Damon was feeling deeply disheartened. Rose knew that everything Damon had done was for Elena's safety, yet it was Stefan who remained by Elena's side. So Rose tried to comfort Damon.
It might just be time to turn the switch off on your emotions.
Old friends becognate.
I will if you will.
In truth, Damon had always kept love and lust separate. His indulgence was a way to suppress his feelings for Elena. At the bar, Jeremy was goofing off playing pool, only to turn around and see Bonnie chatting enthusiastically with Luca. Jeremy gave a self-deprecating smile. Meanwhile, after learning about her fate, Elena was overwhelmed with guilt and self-blame. Knowing that everything started because of her, Stefan pulled her into his arms, vowing that even if it meant going against the originals, he would never surrender Elena. After a passionate encounter with Damon, Rose suddenly received a call from Slater. Slater claimed to have made a major discovery. The curse could be broken, but in addition to the moonstone, they would also need a witch.
Good luck, Rose.
Very nicely done.
Thanks, I have a degree in theater. How can you compel me? A vampire can't compel another vampire.
I'm a special vampire.
It turned out the originals could hypnotize and control vampires. Elijah had compelled Slater to deceive Rose and Damon, then ordered him to take his own life. With a look of sorrow, Slater drove a wooden stake into his own heart. Luca's father was also present, and it turned out he was actually a warlock working for Elijah.
Won't be long now.
This was shaping up to be Elena's greatest crisis yet. Faced with an immortal vampire from the originals, the only way she could protect her loved ones was by sacrificing herself. But the Salvatore brothers were attempting to destroy the curse, which would render Elena useless. What they didn't know was that it was all a lie. They planned to retrieve the moonstone that Catherine had, but she was sealed in the ancient tomb, a place where vampires could enter but not leave. Catherine offered to exchange the moonstone for her freedom, but the Salvatore brothers didn't trust her. Unlocking the tomb's barrier required the help of a witch. Recently, Bonnie and Luca had grown close, and at Luca's suggestion, they exchanged personal items as a magical conduit. After a gust of wind, their powers were connected. each serving as the other's battery. But what Luca didn't know was that Bonnie had already overused her powers and was beginning to show signs of backlash. Luca had indeed set a trap for himself. Later, Bonnie received a request from the Salvatore brothers. Not only was she willing to temporarily lift the barrier, but to prevent Catherine from resisting, she added an extra layer of insurance. Bonnie cast a spell to burn Catherine's photograph to ashes, and by sprinkling these ashes on Catherine, she would be paralyzed for a short time, ensuring nothing could go wrong. Unexpectedly, even this minor spell caused Bonnie to experience backlash. As blood dripped from her nose, she quickly covered it up. Only Jeremy knew that Bonnie was using up her life force to cast spells, but Bonnie made him promise to keep it a secret. To her, a little backlash was nothing compared to ensuring Elena's safety. Jeremy agreed, but secretly decided to act on his own. He stole a portion of the ashes. Meanwhile, Elena privately approached Rose, asking her to get in touch with Klaus. At first, Rose refused, but Elena mentioned that she had a close friend who was a witch and could make a daylight ring. The daylight ring was indeed a huge temptation, so Rose agreed to help Elena. When Elena and Rose arrived at Slater's place, they found him already dead, but fortunately, Slater had a girlfriend. The woman used Slater's contacts to send a message to Klaus.
The doppelganger is alive, and she's ready to surrender. What?
Rose was utterly shocked to learn that Elena planned to sacrifice herself to protect everyone else. Rose had no choice but to inform Damon. On the other side, Jeremy arrived at the tomb first. Being human, he didn't need Bonnie to lift the barrier to enter. Jeremy's intention was to spare Bonnie from suffering any magical backlash, but he underestimated Catherine's cunning. The moonstone was hidden deep within the tomb, and Jeremy didn't have the speed of a vampire, so by the time Jeremy found the moonstone, Catherine had already regained her mobility. Although Jeremy was captured by Catherine, he managed to throw the moonstone out of the barrier. Meanwhile, Jonas, as Elijah's warlock, cast a spell to locate Elena's whereabouts. Elijah spied on Elena and discovered she was at Slater's house. Over at the tomb, Bonnie and Stefan arrived late. They had the moonstone, but Jeremy had become Catherine's bargaining chip. To save Jeremy, Bonnie would have to cast a spell to lift the barrier. This was a major undertaking, time-consuming, and with severe backlash. This has caused Luca, who is doing his homework, to suffer because he has connected his magical energy with Bonnie's. Not only has he become Bonnie's battery, but he has also shared the backlash. Jonas scolded his son for his foolishness. Even with Luca's help, Bonnie still couldn't lift the barrier. Catherine decided to give them some motivation, preparing to sink her fangs into Jeremy's carotid artery. There was no way Stefan would let Jeremy die here. He rushed into the barrier and threw Jeremy out. Catherine had a wicked smile on her face. Although she still couldn't leave, at least she now had Stefan for company. After finding Elena, Damon insisted on taking her away. Damon was truly furious.
This is my decision. No.
Just then, Klaus's henchmen arrived. They were here to pick up the doppelganger. Damon refused to budge, standing firmly in front of Elena even though he knew it might cost him his life. As the two sides faced off, Elijah, one of the originals, suddenly appeared. The vampire at the door was killed by Elijah in an instant. The other two vampires lost all their bravado the moment they realized who he was. Klaus's older brother.
Does anyone else know that you're here?
No.
Well, then you have been incredibly helpful.
It was clear that Elijah hadn't even been serious when he faced the Salvatore brothers earlier. Elijah disappeared in the blink of an eye, leaving the three of them utterly stunned. What was going on? Could it be that Elijah and Klaus weren't on the same side? Later, Jonas asked Elijah why he spared Damon.
However, I did have a little run-in with one of the brothers that killed me.
I assume he didn't live to tell about it.
Actually, I spared him.
It seemed that even among the originals, there wasn't complete unity, despite the foolishness of Jeremy's actions that day. All done out of concern for Bonnie. Bonnie still couldn't accept him after all. Jeremy was her best friend's little brother. When Elena found out that Stefan was trapped in the tomb, she was determined to rush in and reunite with him, but Damon stopped her. Elena and Damon argued outside, with Stefan too pained to intervene, while Catherine looked on with a hint of schadenfreude. The process of a werewolf's transformation is nothing short of bone-crushing, but as the pain intensifies, so does their power. On the night of a full moon, a werewolf can completely overpower their archenemy, the vampire. Since Caroline had confessed to Tyler that she was a vampire, Tyler, despite the natural enmity between vampires and werewolves, had begun to let his guard down because of Caroline's kindness. In just a few days, the full moon would arrive, and Tyler would undergo his first transformation. He would not only experience the excruciating pain of every bone in his body breaking, but he would also lose control. Unable to recognize friend from foe, Caroline wanted to help Tyler get through this full moon. They went to the Lockwood family's ancestral cellar, where they found the walls covered with handprints left by generations of Lockwoods as they battled through the full moon. They discovered Mason's journal, which detailed his transformation process each month. Just reading the descriptions made Tyler's scalp tingle. Inside the journal, there was also a memory card containing a video of Mason's first transformation. To prevent himself from hurting others, Mason had tied himself up and painfully drank wolfsbane to weaken his powers.
5 hours.
Mason's transformation lasted several hours, with every bone in his body breaking and then reforming into the skeleton of a wolf. Mason's agonized screams and the despair in his eyes shattered Tyler's resolve. Caroline hurried to comfort Tyler, pointing out that Mason had written that only the first time was the hardest, and that with each subsequent transformation, the process would speed up. But Tyler questioned Caroline's motives. "Why do you care so much about me? We weren't even friends before, and now we're practically enemies." Caroline could never tell Tyler that she bore some responsibility for Mason's death. When Caroline turned into a vampire, she was all alone and ended up killing an innocent stranger because of it. She understands the loneliness and helplessness Tyler is feeling right now. Tyler was moved by Caroline's words. Just then, Caroline's ex-boyfriend Matt showed up. He still couldn't get over Caroline, and was surprised to find his friend Tyler at her house. The atmosphere suddenly became very awkward. Tomorrow night was the full moon, and Tyler, desperate to get through his transformation safely, kept calling Mason's phone. What he didn't know was that Mason had already been killed by a vampire. However, Tyler's voicemail caught the attention of a woman. The next morning, a woman named Jules visited Tyler's home, claiming to be a friend of Mason's and looking for him. It was only then that Tyler and his mother learned that Mason had never returned to Florida and had been missing for quite some time. As soon as Jules left, she contacted her pack, suspecting that Mason was dead and that there was another werewolf in town.
His nephew.
Later, Tyler and Caroline went down to the cellar to prepare for the full moon. Tyler reinforced all the chains, while Caroline brought along some wolfsbane. When Tyler touched the wolfsbane, it burned him. As expected, everything is balanced, with each force having its counter. Vampires fear verbena, while wolfsbane is the bane of werewolves. Following Mason's video, Tyler prepared to strip naked, prompting Caroline to hastily accuse him of being a pervert. As evening fell, Tyler chained his limbs. He could feel the wildness stirring inside him, so he quickly drank the tea infused with wolfsbane. It felt like his muscles and organs were being seared. Caroline wanted to stay and support Tyler, cheering him on from the side, but with his last shred of sanity, Tyler ordered Caroline to leave. Not wanting to hurt her, Tyler's transformation had entered its most painful stage. His limbs began to twist, his screams barely masking the sound of his bones breaking and reforming. Then his spine started to reshape. Unexpectedly, Caroline didn't retreat. Instead, she hugged the writhing and screaming Tyler tightly, trying to ease his pain. Tyler, nearly begging, urged Caroline to leave quickly, as he was about to lose control. Reluctantly, Caroline exited the dungeon. In a frenzy, Tyler broke the chains. Caroline hid behind the door, feeling so helpless that she began to cry. As his bones restructured, Tyler's body started to change, and his eyes turned amber. Tyler's howling suddenly stopped. Suddenly, there was a crash from behind the door, and the wooden panels were being gnawed through. An angry wolf was about to break free. Caroline immediately fled into the forest. After waiting for a long time and not hearing anything, she nervously went back to check and found that the devastated wooden door had not been broken through.
Tyler?
Do you feel like you are
Tyler?
1,000 miles from home? Do you find your way when you're so far? Do you fear?
This indicated that Tyler had overcome the beast within. Catherine had angered Klaus, one of the originals, leading to the slaughter of her entire family. She had been on the run for 500 years. Now that Klaus knew about Elena, Catherine's doppelganger, she was determined not to let the same tragedy befall her again. She chose to sacrifice herself. To protect Elena, the witch Bonnie cast a spell to create a barrier. effectively keeping Elena confined at home. Damon regularly visits the tomb to see his brother and send some supplies: blood, whips, and candles. Stefan refused the blood, preferring to go without rather than give Catherine the chance to feed. So, he only kept the whip and candles. Damon felt great sympathy for his brother, sacrificing himself to serve a demon. Now that's a real man. In fact, Stefan's life is quite comfortable. Catherine was constantly trying to seduce him. Under the allure of Catherine's perfect body, Stefan's breathing grew heavy. Catherine also tried to drive a wedge between the brothers, whispering that Damon didn't really want to rescue him and was busy stealing his girl. Stefan suddenly snapped awake, realizing it was a dream spun by Catherine. She had silently hypnotized him, truly impossible to guard against. Meanwhile, the she-wolf Jules showed up at the local bar, looking for information about Tyler, which caught Alaric's attention. He immediately contacted Damon. At that moment, Damon was keeping an eye on Elena. Upon hearing the news, he prepared to head to the bar. Who could possibly resist the handsome, devoted, charismatic, and humorous Damon? At the bar, Damon and Alaric plan to use Wolfsbane to confirm Jules's identity. Alaric plays the drunk thug and goes looking for trouble, while the righteous Damon comes to the rescue.
Am I bothering you?
I am not bothering anybody.
Perfect. Well, do it elsewhere.
Damon and Alaric put on an act in front of Jules, using the opportunity to secretly drug her. Jules, caught in the middle, Jules quietly watched them, but in reality, Jules had already smelled the distinct vampire stench coming off Damon from a distance. She didn't touch the drink at all and instead continued to play along with Damon and Alaric's performance. Jules claimed she was looking for a friend. Coincidentally, the friend Jules was searching for, Mason, had been killed by none other than Damon. Without a hint of shame, Damon replied, Mason was a friend of a friend. Technically, Damon wasn't lying. Damon threw out the clue just to get Jules to drink the poison wine. Jules finally decided to come clean, admitting she had known his identity all along. Damon wasn't surprised and asked Jules about her real purpose in coming to town.
But tonight is not the night to pick a fight with me. You've been marked.
Faced with Jules's challenge, Damon remained unfazed, but Alaric, as Damon's close friend, seriously warned him that on the night of the full moon, werewolves could overpower vampires, and any vampire bitten by a werewolf would surely die. For the first time, Damon felt a twinge of fear. After he returned home, he honestly locked the door, and he was even a little paranoid. Meanwhile, Bonnie sought Luca's help to destroy the moonstone with a spell. The moonstone floated into the air and exploded, releasing a burst of brilliant fireworks. But had the spell the moonstone carried really been destroyed? Everything was going so smoothly that something felt off. As mentioned earlier, Luca and his father were Elijah's warlocks, and destroying the spell was information Elijah had deliberately leaked, so it was very likely that the real moonstone had already been swapped by Luca.